So I just want to give our spouses a round of applause. So just a little bit about myself. Kim and I have been married for almost 17 years. We have 3 children. Presley's 12, Gracie's 7, and Jacob's 2. He's about the size of a 3-year-old. I spent about 6 years in the Air Force with security forces. Do I have any SF guys? Awesome. Come on, guys. Come on. Let's go. We got an awesome lunch that HEB has provided for us today. But for the Air Force guys, we were flying in some lobster from Maine. And so we've got a special dining area with chandeliers and waiters and stuff, because that's how we rolled in the Air Force. After I got out of the Air Force in 2007, I joined the Austin Police Department, and I've been there since. Was on patrol for a few years. Was in parks for a little while. Then I spent about 5.5 years on motors. That was a lot of fun, and I recently, a few months ago, transferred into our brand new expanded peer support unit. If you guys have peer support units at your departments, you know how important they are, so it's just been a blessing for me to be able to get and be involved in that, to take care of our officers. So Paul kind of stole a little bit of my thunder. He said, has anybody had a fight, this week? I will say that especially probably like the last 1 to 2 months have definitely been some of the most difficult times for my wife and I, just in terms of being attacked by the enemy. We had a marriage conference last June, and I would say probably at least double the attacks we experienced this time. So all I can say is that the enemy doesn't want you here today. So I praise the Lord that despite whatever has gone on over the last several weeks or months, that you guys came. So thank you so much for being here. So why are we here? Why a marriage conference? Some of these stats you might find to be a little disturbing, and they are. And these are specifically some law enforcement stats, but I know a lot of this stuff carries over into other first responders. We have anywhere as high as an 80% divorce rate, depending on what place you go to. In 2018, we used to say that we were twice as likely to commit suicide versus getting killed in the line of duty, but in 2018, we had so many suicides that it was actually 3 times as likely to commit suicide. And that was put out by the Code 9 project. And then we're almost 300 times more likely to abuse alcohol. All of those things are a result of the jobs that we have, the trauma and things like that we deal with. And so obviously, as we deal with those things at work, we bring those things home with us, and it affects our marriages, it affects our families. And so that is why we're here. We're going to talk about some heavy stuff today, so I'll do my best to add in some humor when I can. So if I make a joke, you guys are going to have to laugh, because if you don't, then I'm just going to try harder, and the jokes are going to get worse and worse. Okay. All right, we're in the right direction. So I wanted to just share a little bit about my testimony and kind of how I got to here. I shared some of this last year, so if you guys were at here last year, some of it may be a little bit familiar, but I've kind of had some different things to change up. I met my soulmate in high school chemistry class. That would be Kimberly back there. I walked into the room, and I just knew right away that she thought I was the greatest thing. So I didn't think I was going to have any trouble dating her. And I guess I figured maybe if I married her really young, then she wouldn't really have enough time to really get to know me and knew what she was getting into, because we got married right out of high school at 19. And so I can definitely say over the last 16 years, I've removed all doubt in her mind that she didn't know what she was getting into. And she's probably back there thinking right now, he's an idiot. But I think that's part of her love language. At least that's what I tell myself, to make myself feel better. So I grew up in a church. I grew up in a Catholic church. There was never a point in my life where I didn't know the Lord. There was never a point that I didn't know that Christ had died for my sins and that he was the only way that I would ever go to heaven. There was never a time in my life where I had any doubt with that whatsoever. When I joined the Air Force, our first duty station was Minot, North Dakota. Anybody ever been there? Yeah. Freezing's the reason. -60, 9 months of snow and 3 months of mosquitoes. So like most married couples, especially I think young married couples, we had no clue what we were getting into. And of course, we fought all the time. Would you agree with that, babe? Yeah. I didn't hear, but it sounded like she said, "I loved you" back there. So that's good. I love you too, babe. So like I said, when I was in the military, I did a lot of stupid things. I'll share one thing in particular that, we were having, it was just tough. It was tough on our marriage and things like that, and I just wanted to get out of North Dakota. But the only way in the Air Force to get out of North Dakota is you either had to go to the 820th, which you basically just deployed all the time, or you had to go to Korea. And so I figured, well, maybe I'll put in for Korea. So I told Kim that, hey, I wanted to put in for Korea. And she was like, no, do not put in for Korea. I don't want you to leave. But I put in for Korea anyway. And then I actually got Korea. So then I had to come up with a reason of how this all happened. And I couldn't just say, they just magically called me up to go, because she already knew that didn't work. But I tried that anyway. And maybe she bought it for a little while. And then one day we were eating, I think we were going away, and one of the girls that was on my shift was so happy to tell Kim that, hey, he put in for that behind your back, right? And so everybody was like, the whole table quieted down, and I was like, so now I had to explain to my wife why I did that. And I really didn't have a good explanation, but to be honest, it was just really about Eric, and Eric wanting to do what Eric wanted to do, and it wasn't about my wife. But there was one night when I was at APD in particular that changed everything, and solely because of the grace of God, I'm able to stand up here and say that we've been married for almost 17 years, because there was time in our marriage where that wasn't even, it didn't even seem possible. As most of y'all know, and I would assume, and you guys in the fire department can correct me if I'm wrong, when you get into the job, and I think especially me as being the way that I was, you start dealing with all the trauma, you start dealing with all the people as you take the same call all the time, and you just start to become jaded, you start to become angry and hateful, and you just look at everybody as bad. That is a common thing that happens to every police officer over the entire world, because I've been to other places where I talk to officers, like in Honduras a lot, and they go through the same exact thing. So there's no difference. It doesn't matter what department you're in, you're going to experience that same thing. And I think depending on where you are with the Lord, for sure, and how you deal with that is going to affect everything. But for me, it really took me down a dark path, and I was not a pleasant person to be with. And that was just added on top of all the other ridiculous stuff that I did. So that didn't help things either. But one night in particular, I was working Frank sector, which is southeast Austin, and it's a pretty busy sector. And Kim calls, and I'm just about to, we had show up. I got everything in the patrol car, and I was just about to leave the south substation. And she calls and she says, hey, is there anything you want to tell me? And I'm like, and my mind's racing, and I'm thinking, oh God, what does she know that I don't know that she knows? And for any of you guys who have ever been in that position, you know exactly what I'm talking about. It is not a fun place to be. I would have rather been anywhere but there. And so I had an addiction at that time, and I didn't know how bad it was. And to be honest, I didn't even know that it was an addiction. And so with that, when I was, from a very young age, I was exposed to pornography. And for any of you guys I'm 36, so any of you guys who could relate to this about 25 to 30 years ago, there used to be a channel called the Spice Channel. And if you know what that is, I'm not going to have you raise your hand, so don't worry about that. But there was all the squiggly lines on the TV back when you had cable, but you didn't have all the channels, so they like squigglied out the actual channel so you couldn't really see what was there. But if you looked really hard for a long time, every now and again you could see something. And so me and my brothers would sit there and watch it because it was there, and then that was kind of the start of a very, very downhill place. So fast forward a bunch of years, Kim at some point, and I'm not really sure exactly how, but she found out that I was looking at pornography. And so at first, she didn't seem, at least to me, she didn't seem to be necessarily too bothered by it. She wasn't happy about it, but I think she just told herself, you know what, this is probably just a normal thing, and I think maybe this is just something that guys do, right? But I will tell you without a doubt that it is 100% a lie from the enemy, because that right there will completely tear your marriage apart, whether your wife knows about it or not, or whether your husband knows about it or not. So sometime later on, she asked me to stop, but I didn't, and I couldn't, even if I wanted to. And that's, I guess, and then at that point, I probably still didn't realize that it was an addiction for me. So fast forward to that night where she called and said, hey, is there anything that you want to tell me? She confronted me with it. She found a charge on her credit card that I had, and she didn't know what it was, so she called the number that was on there. And again, the guy was like so happy to tell her everything I was doing. He's like, oh yeah, he was here and he did this and he did that and it was on this thing for this long and he paid this much and he did this and he did that. And so I was like, man, I can't catch a break with these people calling me out on my stuff. And so she basically said, I'm tired. I'm tired of all the lies. I'm tired of everything, and I'm done. I'm leaving. And so in that moment, my whole world just stopped, and I didn't know what to do. I went in, I told my Sarge, hey, my wife and I are going through some stuff, and I think I need to go home. And he said, yeah, I can't have you here like this. You probably need to go home. And she didn't know that I was coming home, but I felt like if I could just go home and just be there, maybe I could do something. But in reality, I couldn't do anything. I could not fix the situation that I had put myself in. I couldn't lie about it anymore. I couldn't hide it anymore. There was nothing I could do. And what I was struggling with was now completely out in the open. It couldn't be hidden anymore. She couldn't go back and pretend like this never happened. And so I begged her not to leave, but I also begged God for a miracle. Because like I said, there was nothing else that I could do at that point. Something the Lord gave me this morning, because I wanted to stop, but I couldn't help myself, and I knew it was wrong, and I didn't want to do it, but like I said, I just couldn't stop. And so to kind of talk about just the forces that we're up against in those things when we get ourselves into those things, we know that the wages of sin leads to death. It leads to a spiritual death, but it can also lead to a physical death in a sense in terms of a marriage or relationship. And in Acts 19, it talks about the sons of Sceva. And so there was a high priest, Jewish high priest, his name was Sceva. He had 7 sons. So as Paul was going around and casting out demons in Jesus' name, these guys decided, hey, we're going to go do the same thing. And so they basically went up to this guy who was possessed, and they tried to cast this demon out in the Lord's name. And the demon called out to him and said, Jesus, I know, Paul I've heard of, but who are you? And it says that this unclean spirit leaped out of the possessed person's body, and it beat up the 7 sons, and they ran away afraid and naked. And then Mark 3:10, it says, as Jesus was, great crowds were following him, and he was doing all these miracles. And it says in 3:10, for he had healed many, so that all who had diseases pressed around him to touch him. And whenever the unclean spirit saw him, they fell down before him and cried out, you are the Son of God. And he strictly ordered them not to make him known. And it really kind of spoke to me because I thought, you know what? We all battle with addictions. It doesn't matter if it's pornography or alcohol or hate or anger or whatever it is. We all deal with these things that we try our best to control, but we really can't control it. And so you have these guys trying to do all this stuff in their own power, outside of the power of Christ. And it didn't work for them. And I can say from personal experience, and I would assume that you would agree with me, that we cannot do it either. We cannot do those things. We cannot break those chains that we bind because of the things that we do on our own. It's just not going to happen. You can try really hard, and maybe you'll do good for a little while, but the thing is you can't regenerate your own heart. Christ has to do that. We cannot do that on our own. I didn't know that at the time. I didn't realize that. I tried to do it. I tried to fix everything myself. And I came to that place where I realized I could not do it. So one day I came to church, which was this church when it was still, before it was built, and or maybe it was already built, I'm not really sure. But the pastor, Jonathan Leftwich, that's over the church, was doing a sermon series on the second coming. And he was in Luke 12:54, and it's talking about interpreting the present time. And he's saying, look, you see a cloud in the west, and a storm is coming. You see the sun in the east, it's going to be a scorcher. And he calls them hypocrites and said, how can you not interpret the present time? Meaning, how can you not see that I'm here right now? You can just look at all these things and see this, but I'm right in front of you, and you're missing it. And he asked one question. He said, if God came back right now, do you know where you would go? Do you know God? And I asked myself that question, and immediately in my heart, I knew I did not know God, and that scared me. And he lit a fire at that time for me to want to seek him. So when I came back to church the next week, I had this emotional high, which was really the Holy Spirit. But then the rest of the week, it would kind of go down, and then I would look forward to Sunday, and it would come up, and then it would go down, and then we got invited to life group, and I was in a Catholic church, so we didn't do stuff like that. We didn't go to people's houses and have Bible studies. It just wasn't something that we did. And so it was completely foreign to me. And my wife grew up in a Baptist church, so to her it was totally normal. So I was just like this. And I didn't know what to say, and I was that wallflower that everybody talks about. And I didn't know what to say. I didn't know what they were talking about, and I felt super uncomfortable. But over time, Wednesday now I got this little spike, and then it would go down a little bit. So eventually I was just on this spiritual high all the time because of the Holy Spirit. Even with all of that and the Lord opening my eyes, it was still a struggle, and a lot of times I felt like Kim had one foot out the door. But God showed me that with him, my addiction, or without him, my addiction to pornography was never going to go away. There was nothing I could do. And I realized if I could have done it on my own and fixed it, I would have already done it, or I wouldn't have gotten myself in that position in the first place. And really, 1 Corinthians 10:13 was such a huge, important verse for me because it really spoke to how powerless we are, but how mighty God is. And I don't have it up on a slide, but I'm just going to read it. 1 Corinthians 10:13. No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man. God is faithful, and he will not let you be tempted beyond your means or beyond your ability, but with that temptation, he will also provide the way of escape that you may be able to endure it. So what that really told me is, you know what, Eric, you're powerless to deal with this, but God's not. And I realized that. And so in that, the times that I would look at it, if I got on my knees and I cried out to God and I prayed, please take this away from me, he would take it away from me, to a point that he did it so much that if I wanted to look at it, I specifically wouldn't pray because I knew God would take it away. That's how messed up I was. And so it really just came to a place where he totally broke me free of that, and the temptation was gone, and I never had to worry about it again. But again, it was never in my own power. It was only in the power of Christ that he was able to do that. So praise him for that. Later on, I didn't know at the time, but later on I would find out that Kim was praying for me for 7 years to have a relationship with Christ. And the entire time that she did, she never said anything to me about it. And when she told me, I was just floored. And every time I think about it, I'm still floored by the fact that my wife put her faith and her trust in God despite what Eric was doing, and she just prayed for me, and she didn't give up. She didn't give up on she probably gave up on me, but she didn't give up on God. So with that, the Lord has given me a word to share with you this morning. But before we do that, I just wanted to go ahead and pray. Father, I just thank you for this opportunity that you give us to be here. Lord, I thank you for the fact that with you, Father, nothing is impossible. Lord, there is not one addiction, there is not one stronghold that you can't break. So, Father, I just pray for any strongholds or any addictions that that people are dealing with and going through, and they may have been going through it their whole lives and struggling with it, or maybe it's something new, Lord, but I just pray, Father, that you would show them, Father, that you are powerful and that you can break that if they would just call on your name, Lord, and they would just cry out to you to take that burden, to take that addiction, to take that stronghold away from them, Lord. And we pray this in your holy and perfect name. Amen. So this brings me to the message I have for you guys, which is love without condition. Is there anybody here that wants to throw out, when I say love without condition, what does that mean to you? What do you think that means?
Love like there's no such thing as a broken heart kind of thing. Love without expecting something in return, I guess.
Yeah. He said love without feeling like you need something in return. Anybody else? Y'all really want to get to lunch. Say that again, sir? It's not based on what we do. Absolutely. You see, sorry, somebody. I didn't hear it.
It's not based on what we do. It's not based on what we don't do.
Good. Not based on what we do or what we don't do. Jumping through hoops for it. So for most of my marriage, I was very selfish. And at times, I do still struggle with being selfish. And my wife is always happy to remind me of that when I need to, when she needs to. So thank you. I was lost, broken, miserable person. But even worse, I didn't have a personal relationship with Christ. I didn't know what love was because I didn't know him, so therefore I couldn't know who love is. The thing was, although I knew Christ and I knew that he died for my sins and I knew he was the only way, what I came to realize is Satan knows the same thing. So what made me any different? He knows all that. So the difference is that personal relationship. And you can't have... it's either one or the other. You can't have both. I tell my girls that even at as young as 12 and 7, that if someone wants to date them, they have to date me first. Because if they don't know the love of Christ, they're never going to know how to love my daughters appropriately. And I think as men, a lot of times in wedding ceremonies, we walk our daughters up and we give them away. And that's just part of a ritual. Maybe we don't really think about what that is or what it's signifying. But when I give my daughter's hand to another man, I'm giving the authority that God has given me over her, which is really a responsibility. And I don't say authority with a negative connotation, but I'm really giving that man authority over my daughter. And if I'm going to do that, I need to know that he loves the Lord and that he knows the Lord. Because I don't want my daughters to have to live with a man that doesn't know the Lord, like my wife had to live with a man that didn't know the Lord. So one of the first parts before we can even, I think, get into love without condition, before we can even begin to understand it, we have to accept the truth that God is who God says he is. Because if you can't start there on that foundation, then there's no point in trying to go any further. If you don't believe him, you don't believe his word, then what his word says to you isn't really going to matter. So in John 1:1 says, in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was God. God's Word is inerrant and infallible. If one sentence is off, the whole thing is. So you can't go into the Bible and look at it and say, well, this part of it is true, but maybe this part of it's not because, humans wrote it and it was a long time ago and all those kinds of things. God doesn't work like that. And so you have to start there. If you don't believe this whole book is 100% true, then don't go on to the next step. That's got to be your first step. The second thing is Paul had talked about this when he welcomed us in, division. Satan wants to rob you of God's truth. And he does it in different ways. In John 8:44, it says, he was a murderer from the beginning, and he does not stand in the truth because there is no truth in him. When he lies, he speaks out of his own character, for he is a liar and the father of lies. I don't know if God could have made it any clearer that Satan is a liar. But I think a lot of times we forget about that because he does it in such a way that we don't realize that he's actually telling us that, which is why it's so important to continually be grounded in God's truth. But Satan wants to rob you of God's truth. And he wants to divide your relationship with God and your spouse. And if we look at, as the next slide rolls on, he wants to divide your relationships. He wants to divide that relationship between you and God, and he wants to divide it between you and your spouse. Now, whether he goes after the relationship between you and God, or he tries to go after it between you and your spouse, it's all connected because Christ is the center of your marriage, which he needs to be. He's going to attack at any angle in any way to trip you up and to get you out of that Christ-centered relationship. And how does he do that with your relationship to God? He tells these kinds of things. He says, if you don't know the Lord, he said, hey, God doesn't exist. Just do whatever makes you happy. We hear that all the time. Just live your life how you want to live your life. Do what makes you happy. Live for yourself. If God was a loving God, why would he? And then fill in the blank. We hear that all the time from people. But I wonder who's really asking that question. I'll talk about it later, but that goes back to Genesis 3:1 where Satan comes in the garden and says, did God really tell you that? Did God really say you're going to die? We have to be aware of what the enemy's trying to do, which is divide us. What about with your spouse? How does he try to divide you and your spouse? Finances, kids, intimacy, infidelity, you don't make me happy anymore, the work, you're doing one thing, I'm on one path, you're on another path. And when I thought about it and I really looked at all of those things, whether it was your relationship with God or your relationship with your spouse, all of those things that were up there are about me, things that I want to do. It's all about selfishness. And again, we see that right off the bat. Genesis 2:24, God creates marriage. Genesis 3:1, the very next verse, Satan tries to divide it, and he does. Eve falls for it. Adam stands around. He doesn't do anything. He's just standing there watching the enemy make lies to his wife that he knows aren't going to be good, because God told him, for in the day when you eat of it, you will surely die. He didn't say if you eat. He said when you eat of it. He already told him it was going to happen. And Adam is just standing around. I don't know what Adam was doing, but he wasn't doing what he needed to be doing. He wasn't doing what God had called him to do, which was to provide for Eve, to protect her. He gave him an authority and a purpose over her. He gave him a purpose and authority when he asked him to name the animals, and then he gave him a purpose and authority when he created this woman for him, specifically for him. So I can promise you one thing, if you haven't already realized it, Satan does not want your marriage to last another second. I don't know the time frame between Genesis 2:24 and Genesis 3:1, but I would imagine it probably wasn't that long. I would imagine Satan probably didn't waste any time in trying to get into divide what God had brought together. And again, he didn't just divide the relationship between Adam and Eve. He divided the relationship between Adam and God and Eve and God, that Christ-centered marriage that we talked about. In Mark 3:25, and by the way, I forgot to mention earlier that this is the translations that you're seeing as ESV. It says in 25, and if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. And just kind of to give a little background so that we're not taking this out of context, Jesus had just assigned 12 apostles to him, and he was doing all of these things, and his family got to a place to where the crowd had gathered so that they couldn't eat, and his family heard of it. They went out and they grabbed him and they said, hey, he's out of his mind. And they said, hey, he's possessed. He's got a demon in him. And he said, in 22, it says, and the scribes who came down from Jerusalem were saying he is possessed by Beelzebul, and the prince of demons cast out demons. And he called to him and said to them in parables, how can Satan cast out Satan? If a kingdom is divided against itself, that kingdom cannot stand. And if a house is divided against itself, that house will not be able to stand. So do you think your home, your marriage is going to be able to stand if it's divided? If you guys are divided against yourselves? No, there's no way it's going to be able to stand. And we see that. I mean, we see that with almost an 80% divorce rate just in law enforcement. Outside of Christ, there's no way we can do anything. So Satan does, like I said, desires to divide our home and marriages. But as I like to say, not today, Satan. Not our marriage, not our home. We have to be grounded in truth. Love, Ephesians 6. Everybody knows it. Armor of God. But one of the things that I think really maybe that we forget is that in verse 10, it says, finally be strong in the Lord and in the strength of his might, put on the whole armor of God, that you may be able to stand against the schemes of the devil. For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities, against the cosmic powers over this present darkness, against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places. So, as I was talking about the sons of Sceva trying to do things in their own power outside of Christ, there's no way you're going to be able to withstand those things outside of the power of Christ. There's just no way you can do it. Christ has to be the center of your life. He has to be the center of your marriage. And that's something for the majority of the beginning of our marriage we didn't have. And that's 100% on me. So that brings me to love without condition. What is it? We had a few people mention some things. I need one volunteer to come up to the stage, preferably a firefighter. Some of y'all may be wondering, what's your name?
Joel.
Joel.
Yes, sir.
Some of y'all might be wondering why I asked for a firefighter.
We're awesome. The best.
Yeah, absolutely. There's a good reason, and after I ask the question, you'll know why. So if this gentleman right here, let's just, not him, just using him as an example, because I know he wouldn't do this, but let's say one day he got up and said, you know what, I go to the grocery store, there's that lady walking there, I don't like her, and he takes her out, takes her life. And it's your wife, it's your spouse. Or maybe it was your husband. And show of hands, and let's be honest, who would forgive him for it? Come on, he's a firefighter. It'd be different if I called a cop up here, but everybody loves firefighters. Not a lot of people would. Understandable. Well, no one is going to forgive him, so I guess the next question is kind of a mute point. But let's say he was sentenced to death for that. How many people of you would go to the judge and say, Judge, I want to take his place. Let me take his place. I forgive him. Let me take his place. How many people would do that? Nobody. Paul would. Love you, brother. I think Paul gets where I'm going here. Thank you. Y'all give him a round of applause. Again, I know he would never do anything like that, but I just needed to illustrate. But I want to tell you something. Jesus did without hesitation. And he didn't just take that. He took everything from beginning to the end, and he took it and he put it on his shoulders, and he carried a cross, and he died for each and every one of us. And he took that punishment and that judgment that we all so deserve, and he put it on his shoulders, and he took it. That is an example of love without condition. John 3:16. Everybody knows John 3:16. For God so loved the world that he gave his only Son, that whoever believes in him should not perish but have eternal life. That's love without condition. Romans 5, 6 through 8. For while we were still weak, at the right time, Christ died for the ungodly. For one will scarcely die for a righteous person. We saw that in that example. Though perhaps for a good person, one would even dare to die. We didn't do that. But God shows his love for us, and that while we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Ladies and gentlemen, that is what love without condition is. And I say all of that to bring us into this. Husband and wife, what would your marriage look like if you loved each other without condition? What would my marriage look like with my wife if I just loved her without condition? Now, I understand that we're not God, and we can't understand that kind of love, and we can't even begin to be able to put on this ability to truly love without condition like God does. But what if we just took even a little bit of that and we loved our spouse without condition? What would our marriages look like? Because the problem with the other side of that, loved based on condition, is that it's corrupted love. It's selfish and it divides. That's the problem. And that's why it's so difficult, because we're like in the middle of those two things, to where we're not God, so I can't truly love unconditionally, but yet he calls us to love our wives as much as he loves the church. Are we actually doing that? Are we even trying to do that? Or are we allowing Satan to come in and divide our marriage like he did with Adam and Eve? 1 Peter 3:7, and I'm going to just kind of camp out here a little bit. It says, and y'all have probably already read it on the screen. Verse 7, likewise, husbands, live with your wives in an understanding way, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel, since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, so that your prayers may not be hindered. And as I broke this down, I thought, okay, what do we got here? We got likewise, so he's already telling us beforehand, he's already giving us a command. It's a command of submissiveness. It says, likewise, husbands. He's obviously speaking to us. He doesn't say wives, he says husbands. So he's directly talking to us men. So we got to listen up in this. And what does he say? He said to live with your wife in an understanding way. What does that mean? How do I live with my wife in an understanding way? Well, it's a command. He's saying, hey, I want you to do this. This is something that I expect for you to do. And we all know if we get into a place where we're outside of what the Lord wants us to do, it always ends up bad. So I know that, hey, Eric, I've got to love my wife in an understanding way. But the problem with that is, as long as we've been married, I don't know what goes on in her mind. I can't figure it out. If I'm like, hey, I did this, and I was trying to help you out, and she's like, oh, great, that just made my day much, much longer. Thanks. Right? Doesn't matter what I try to do. I feel like, man, I can't, and it's not her fault. I'm just like, I don't know. I have no idea what she's saying. I'm totally clueless. And if you're a guy out there right now, you know exactly what I'm talking about, because I love her to death, but I don't understand anything. Like, I'm lost most of the time, and I feel bad. And she tries to tell me, she's like, you don't communicate. And I'm like, I don't know what to communicate. I thought I said this. You know, I don't know if I need to do a PowerPoint to communicate better, but I'm just not good at it. It's just not something I'm good at. And I think maybe we're all like that. I don't know. But live with your wives in an understanding way. John MacArthur, in his book, in the study portion of an ESV book, he says to live with your wives, not submitting, and this is in the notes section for that verse, not submitting as a leader, but submitting to their needs, to their fears, to their feelings. So I'm like, man, yeah, I fail at that. I don't submit to the things that she needs or her feelings. Do I try to really understand her feelings? Or do I just say, it's just woman stuff? You know, it's that time of the month. She's pregnant. She's got pregnancy brain. I don't know, hormones. I try to describe it. She's like, I'm such an idiot. But the reality of it is we are to subordinate ourselves to our wives. So what does that mean? I told this to Kim the other day, and she laughed at it, and I thought she had already have heard about this before, but has anybody ever heard that men are microwaves and women are crock pots? Anybody?
Light switch is iron.
Yeah, there you go.
Light switch is like iron.
Yeah. So what does that usually boil down to? Sex, right? I'll wake up in the morning and I'm like, hey, babe. She's like, don't even think about it. I'm like, I got to go to work. And then if I go to work and, we don't have our time, then I'm going to be frustrated all day. And she's like, I haven't even taken a shower. And I'm like, I don't care. She's like, no, I got to take a shower. And I'm like, okay, well, I know that you're trying to sleep in, but can you go take a shower real quick? And then, we can do our thing. And then that way I can go to work, right? Because I'm worried about Eric's needs. I'm not subordinating myself to her needs, which is the sleep, which is just to have time to relax, right? So where does the crock pot come in? Again, like we're ready to go just like that. Come home from work, I don't even need to shower. She's got throw up on her from the kids, been homeschooling all day, hair's pulling her hair out, and I'm like, hey, babe, do you want to go to the bedroom? She's like, I'm going to stab you. And I'm like, I don't understand. Like, this makes perfect sense to me, right? So I think maybe if I subordinated my needs, what Eric wants, to her, and I put my attention onto her needs, that maybe that's not what she wants right now. Maybe she needs whatever that is. I know it's different for everybody, and everybody's in different seasons and stages of life. So ask yourself that, men. Am I subordinating my needs to my wife? Because that is how you show honor to her. That is how you love her, just as Christ did. He put on this servant thing, and he served people when he fully deserves to be served by everybody. And he gave us that example, and I think we fail so much at doing that because we get so wrapped up in ourselves. And it really ties into Colossians 3:19, where it says, husbands, love your wives and do not be harsh with them. It says, don't make them bitter. Don't do things that make your wife bitter. So if I know that she's tired and I'm trying to wake her up, that's probably going to make her bitter towards me, because she's going to say, you're just worried about yourself. You're not worried about my needs. And she's right. She's absolutely right. And then it says, showing honor to the woman as the weaker vessel. Some might think weaker as in lesser, but it's not. It's not at all. Because the next thing is it says, because since they are heirs with you of the grace of life, Christ doesn't look at men and women as men being up here and women being down here. It says they're co-heirs. We all are children of God. We all have the same salvation and the same grace, and we're equal in that way. Spiritually, we're equal in that way. But he does have roles for men, and he has roles for women. And when we get outside of those roles, we mess up God's plan, and we see destruction, we see division, and we see these things. So as men, we really need to do a much better job, and I say that about myself, that I need to do a much better job of subordinating the needs that I have to my wife's needs, and not doing things that I know are going to make her bitter towards me. Because that's what Satan wants us to do. And then, so that your prayers may not be hindered, one of the notes is talking about salvation. So if I'm doing all those things against my wife, let's say I'm the husband, I'm saved, and my wife's not. You think I'm going to bring my wife to know the Lord by making it about myself, not subordinating my needs to her, and then being harsh with her? That's not going to happen. She's not going to see the Lord in any of that. We can't do that. We just simply cannot do that. If everything or anything that I've said today is, if you've missed anything, please take to heart the love without condition. And you have to know that that is not even going to be achievable or attainable, even in the slightest sense, if you don't know the love of Christ. If you haven't fully given your life to Christ, none of that stuff is going to matter. You can try as hard as you want to do it in your own power and do all these things, and you might succeed for a while. You might even succeed 20 or 30 years, but you're never going to have the relationship that God intended for you to have. So with that, I want to thank each and every one of you again for being here today and just allowing me to share what the Lord has for you guys. So thank you all very much.
Thank you, Brother Eric. I think we're going to do some door prizes. Yes. I don't know where the bucket is for the tickets, but while we get that, I did want to share a couple of things. So this week I was in Colorado. I just actually flew in at 2 in the morning to be here. But praise God, made it home, yes. Went to sleep for a few hours and then came right back. But I just love God's timing because my wife and I were at a conference called Transform, and I just learned so much about relationships. And there's no doubt that the timing of us going to this conference and then jumping here to be a part of this was something that God really just spoke to my heart. So I don't have any formal presentation or notes, but I just wanted to give you some just what I would call golden nuggets from some takeaways at the conference. And I want to speak first about just what Eric shared about Kim praying for Eric. It's interesting that he used the word relationship with Jesus. He didn't say that Kim prayed for him to be set free from a particular sin. She prayed that he would have a relationship. And that makes all the difference, because if we try to just pray away particular sins that we have, that's not real freedom. Freedom is having a relationship, because that is what grace is. Grace is this unconditional love that God is expressing, and he did that through his son and saying, I want you to know my love. I want you to be a part of my family. And that's where great transformation takes place. There's some really cool things about brain science, and I'm not going to get into all of it, but I want you to know that grace-based attachments, they actually form our guidance system for life and even for leadership in your role at the home or maybe your place of work. And an attachment is a long-term relationship with another person over time. So that's where you can really start to see your behavior change when you attach yourself to the right person. Sometimes we attach ourselves to sin, and that destroys us. But when we attach ourselves to the Godhead, it has amazing impacts in our life. Our strongest attachments have the greatest impact on our behavior. And so you might be thinking, well, what is grace? And genuine grace must always be experienced in relationship. It says you are special. It says you're God's favorite. And this special happened the moment you were born. Grace sets our attachments, and they form our identity. Do you know that in the brain, the strongest part of the brain that starts to work when you're born is, I can't even pronounce the word, but what it is, it's the part of the brain that wants to bond. So that's why you see such powerful bonding that takes place between a mother and a child. We're born with that. God created that bonding part of our brain, and he's been crying out to us and wanting us to hear him say, come to me. So it makes sense that even he's given us in the natural realm a husband and a wife for us to have that bonding relationship. But there's so many things that want to take us away from the beauty of experiencing that healthy bond. So I just wanted to share that. I thought that was pretty cool. I have some more throughout the day that I want to just give you some notes about. But let's give some door prizes away. Are you ready, Kim?
Yes, I'm ready. Okay, so there seems to be just a little bit of confusion. I'll just clear the air real quick. You guys were given 7 tickets when you got here together. Those tickets are going to be handed out at all the tables, besides our Honduras table over here, which we'll go more into detail if you haven't had time to actually talk to anybody over here. Those tickets are going to go into each vendor's table, and they, towards the end, will come up and draw tickets from their table to give you a door prize. You got 2 more, one for each you and your spouse. Those are what we're going to be drawing from now. Let me grab them. There you go. All right, and I got some lovely runners. Awesome. So I'm just going to pull random things. All these prizes were donated. Men, if you get a set of earrings, you can wear them or you can give them to your wife. Women, if you get a fishing pole or anything manly, again, you can keep it. We'll go ahead and just start grabbing random things. First is a set of earrings that was donated. I have to be careful because there are some thin blue line earrings that she has donated. They're in here as well. And
This is going out to ticket number 332.
firefighters. So if you get a thin blue line and you're a firefighter, you can probably trade with your neighbor.
332. Who's got ticket 332? Okay, we'll go to the next one. 358. 358. You got it? Yeah.
Oh, where's 332? We don't have a 332? Uh-oh. Wait.
Well, we'll just give it the next prize.
You,
Yeah, last 3 digits. Oh, you have it. Okay, all right. Sorry.
okay. Yep, I guess. I trust you.
Let's see. Yes, that's it. So we'll do the last 3 digits, okay?
Okay, we have, for our firefighters here, this was donated specifically for you guys, for your hard work out at the station.
346. 346. All right.
Hey, you went to a firefighter. Woo! All right, we have a handbag that was donated that is a concealed carry handbag.
329. 329. All right.
LB. How many is that? $25 Lowe's gift card.
345. All right. 345.
Hey.
Is that good? One more? Okay.
And then we have a Shield of Hope tumbler. Michelle, raise your hand. Michelle went and put our logos on these cups for us. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you. And that goes to 344.
Hey.
That's okay. You can win
We
twice.
have a lot of prizes, so you're going to go home loved. That was our goal, to get y'all in here and to love on y'all, because a lot of times
Yes.
you don't get no love.
Okay, so we're about to go on break. So I want you to do something for me real quick. Stand up, face your spouse.
Eric Bauer.
And I just want you to look into your spouse's eyes. You don't have to say anything. Just spend a moment looking into your spouse's eyes.
Are we allowed to kiss?
You can kiss. All right, I want you to say one thing you appreciate about them, just from today. Maybe they woke you up because you were sleeping too long. It doesn't have to be anything profoundly deep, just one thing.
Give me a kiss. With lip gloss.
Awesome. You guys are doing great. Y'all go grab a snack, and we'll be back here at 11:20.
We have some cookies that were donated by San Marcos Taxi Company, all first responder cookies, and we have a lot, so feel free to eat a lot. So am I next, or are you?